How can we maximise the efficiency and effectiveness of our ESG campaigns?
When we talk about ESG and how we make sure that the activities that we perform and promote for clients, first of all, we have to think about how important ESG has become to all audiences and all stakeholders within organisations. We approach it very differently to how we did even 5 years ago. So historically, where having a strong environmental commitment or environmental policy was a kind of a point of difference for an organisation.
Yeah.
Today, it's the bare minimum standard that all stakeholders expect. So the crux of it from our perspective is that it's not one message for all audiences and all sets of stakeholders.
Tailoring our comms has become even more important. You talked about the kind of real seismic shift that we've seen in the last 5 years, and I've absolutely seen that, and I've witnessed that across all of the accounts that we work with.
The significance and importance of a strong ESG policy and strong commitments and kind of a proactive approach is perhaps up there most important for investors as a specific stakeholder group. It kind of cuts across two different areas. So you've got things like FTSE for Good and Principles for Responsible Investments, which are groups or indexes where actually you can only be presented to those investors if your ESG policies and strategies and commitments are up there first and foremost, proactive, doing identifiable things to improve your performance in those areas. So if you're not doing that, effectively you're cutting off an ever increasing number of investment opportunities with those groups.
I think it was a study by Morgan Stanley actually said that this year, 85% of individual investors have an active interest in investing where there's a robust corporate social responsibility program.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real shift. And in fact, I think as a stakeholder group, investors has often been overlooked.
Yeah, like the Principles for Responsible Investment as a group, they represent 80 trillion in assets, about 50% of all traded shares. That's an incredible number that was absolutely not there 5 or 10 years ago. So you can really see the shift. And those people only speak to, only invest in the organisations where they can demonstrate that their ESG policies and strategies are robust and are proactive in what they're doing. So from a communication perspective, it's absolutely critical that it's not just we have this strong policy, but it's critical that you're demonstrating how that policy is being put into action and the proactive things that you're doing to deliver on those commitments. So obviously in a large amount of the work that we do, consumers as a very broad stakeholder group are absolutely critical. How have you seen a shift within that sector, and how are you dealing with that or responding to those changes?
So we know that consumers are more discerning than ever. We know that consumers are choosing to align themselves with brands that really reflect their own values. And that could be brands that have really strong ESG commitments. I think we've moved away from consumers being purely transactional, and that has been a shift. And how we communicate that has shifted alongside.
From a brand perspective, I think that's a massive opportunity, right? You can be ahead of the game or you can be lagging behind. Where I think is absolutely critical is that you're kind of honest, transparent, and that you communicate from a point of authenticity, right?
Yeah, that's really important.
There's lots of brands that have a real challenge in that their core product is arguably less sustainable than others, right? Sure. So in those scenarios, it can't be a case of, well, we can't communicate around ESG and about sustainability and about decarbonisation because we're in energy industry or we're in kind of fast fashion or whatever. But actually, it's about being open and honest and having a frank conversation about what you are doing.
I absolutely agree. And I think there's been some really good examples of brands that have been very authentic in their communication, and they've not only told storytelling when they've actually had positive improvements in terms of their ESG, but also those that have been very open to say, we're not where we want to be, but here's how we're going to change that.
Yeah.
I think that's as equally as important as reporting on the actual positives.
People are a lot more likely to engage with you because you're human fundamentally.
Absolutely.
As a brand, right? If you constantly say we're doing all these great things, but ignore the fact that you've got some real fundamental challenges, then people are much more suspicious. People are much less likely to engage with you.
Having that authenticity will drive a deeper connection with your consumers fundamentally,
Yeah.
and it will last longer. It's not shying away from that message,
Yeah.
but it's the way that you communicate it.
A group that is often not looked at or not paid attention to as much as they should be as employees. So employees absolutely have the opportunity to be huge advocates, but they are on the inside and they know exactly what you are doing. So the whole thing of greenwashing, which is a massive challenge or a massive risk for brands, your employees know exactly if you're greenwashing or not.
Yeah, absolutely. They are your internal champions. And when communicating with them in the right way, they're extremely powerful.
Yeah.
I think the moment it goes wrong is when businesses' words and their promises don't match up to their outcomes. Internal stakeholders will lose trust, and it's very, very difficult to get that back. So local communities is a really interesting stakeholder group in terms of ESG. Making sure that you communicate with your local stakeholders regularly is critically important. Bringing them on that journey so that you're not just kind of giving them the news that's very well packaged. You're actually inviting them in at certain points throughout that journey.
Yeah, and I think especially where in areas where you are operating, there's a great opportunity to really be proactive in how you engage with that community by understanding the challenges that they're experiencing. Not only does that benefit that local community, but it gives you some fantastic talking points to talk about on a wider level as well.
So Rich, how do we decide on the different tactics that we employ for different campaigns?
It's about understanding each of your stakeholder groups and understanding what is going to engage them best. We use a lot of different video, thought leadership, social media, influencers, whatever it might be, and they all have their place, but they're all more or less relevant for different groups. So if you look at investors as a group, you're really needing to demonstrate and communicate how your ESG programs are driving a benefit in either business performance, the long-term prosperity of the business. That's what's going to engage that group. In terms of how you deliver that, it's likely to be thought leadership, it's likely to be video that can be shared more widely. If you look at local communities, that's the other end of the scale. That's much more likely to be local events, sponsorship of local events where you have an opportunity to get in front of that audience. Whatever the tactic is, it has to be relevant to the audience that you're targeting. And I think where we spend most of our time is really breaking down those different audiences and creating kind of mini campaigns within each of those pillars so that we know what's coming out of the other end is going to resonate.
I think sometimes it's even a case of, identifying those key audiences. We have the same message, but we talk about it in very different ways. And that is a sort of tailored communication plan that we roll out for our clients.
Fundamentally, it's about each understanding your audience and understanding each of the different stakeholder groups that you're looking to engage with, and finding the right approach and the right tactics and the right methodology to engage those most successfully.